Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Went to Pandora? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Pandora female warriors, designed and trained to battle against Nova, protectors of humanity, and this is how they train themselves. Baffling. These were the words ringing through the visage of the faceless figure as he observed the proceedings below. Cloaked in blackness, surrounded on all sides by broken or rotting buildings, he looked on with ease despite the heavy raindrops pouring down upon him for every second he sat prone upon the broken balcony. His vision, not obscured, allowed him to continue to watch the sight unfold before him, which was unusual to say the least. That being several teenage girls in bright purple uniforms, complete with insanely short skirts and cute little blue bows, currently in the midst of stabbing, slashing, gouging, eviscerating, and generally mutilating each other in more ways than any movie slasher villain. For a single moment, his eyes locked on to a young girl with a pair of green pigtails, SWNGNG, a pair of what appeared to be a pair of small tomahawks at another, smaller, blonde girl, deflecting the strikes with a cross-shaped spear weapon. Despite their young age and seemingly fragile appearance, both teens fought with unmatched brutality and intensity, each peering into the other with a mixture of concentration and determination, with the goal of which to be the last one standing. The exchange lasted for a few moments, with the battle being a standard give-and-take affair, one blow being deflected or countered by each figure. For a moment it seemed the spear-wielding girl held the upper hand, taking advantage of her weapon's longer reach and the momentum she gained from rotating the spear along with her body, essentially creating razor-sharp wheel movements. She seemed to have the tomahawk girl cornered, when without warning, the girl launched one of her axe-like weapons at the girl, firmly planting it into the girl's right knee, splattering BLD in every direction. Splinters of bone and sinew spattered across the ground, eliciting the slightest twinge of sympathy in his eyes, along with a few bone fragments. Kneecapped, the girl's assault promptly sputtered and died. Losing her grip on her spear, she dropped onto her one good knee, screaming in blind agony, her voice drowned out by the rain and thunder. However, the green-haired girl hadn't finished her assault, quickly closing the gate between her and her opponent before slashing her throat wide open with her remaining weapon. BLD sprayed, spurting from her neck as though a hose had just been punctured, leaking fitfully between fingers that struggled to slow the flow. The now dying girl piteously attempted to scream again in agony, only to let out a sickening gurgling noise. BLD flowed from her mouth in small bubbles, wordless sounds leaking out of her mouth. All the while her eyes remained wide in an eerie sear of terror and pain, tears seemingly leaking out, yet the rain preventing any accurate measure. Barely mustering out one last choked sob, the girl promptly fell flat into the wet muddy ground, her BLD quickly forming a large puddle around her, while her attacker looked on with apathy. Instead, she opened up her free hand, resulting in a strange blue-like energy forming, the ethereal flow gradually taking shape before forming a second replacement tomahawk in her palm. With both weapons in hand, the girl turned to leave and seek out new prey, but only to stop and let out a pain-filled rattle as 3 arrows quickly pierced her unprotected backside, one drilling into her lower back and another puncturing her right knee. In less than a second, she too hit the ground, weapons falling from numbed fingers, BLD also forming around her body, quickly mixing with the water surrounding her. Her assailant, meanwhile, remained unseen to the observer, eyes remaining trained on the defeated pair for a moment, watching as more of the fluid that helped provide them with life slowly washed away with the rain. A brutal test to establish DMNCE and skill amongst the ranks. Effective in terms of combat experience and application. In terms of preservation of life and mental health, however, hardly the standard that would be deemed acceptable. His eyes quickly raised from the scene below, now overlooking the massive battlefield on which he stood. Roughly 5 miles of land surrounded him. Countless half-completed and/or broken buildings littered the area, which was considerably darker and more atmospheric due in part to the rain and blackened sky. Thankfully, depending on who you were asking, this cacophony of noise served to drown out the anguished cries of the countless defeated souls who languished in their suffering, each covered in grisly injuries, some with missing limbs or ruptured organs, screaming in pain that couldn't even be described through written or spoken words. The spectacle had been going on for roughly 2 hours at this point, during which he'd seen individuals who likely knew each other and interacted with each other as comrades in arms and potentially friends, went out of their way to effectively mutilate each other seemingly without mercy. It was unsightly to say the least. Ignoring the rather brutal showing of carnage, the stranger also took note of the level of skill, or rather the more skilled combatants of the warriors currently in battle, taking particular note that only a small handful of those individuals remained, all of whom were currently congregating in a single area. In the mere blink of an eye, the stranger quickly zoned in on the group's energy signature, noting that there seemed to be roughly 7 individuals left, each with varying levels of power. Blue eyes flashed into red, an all too familiar gleam for one who knew where to look. Distance from targets, 200 meters, he murmured. Estimated time of arrival, 10.8 seconds. With a single superhuman burst of speed that would have put a stealth bomber to shame, the stranger rocketed towards the spot, yet without so much as making a single noticeable noise. Moving as quickly and silently as the wind, with the rain and thunder helping to cover any additional sounds his movements produced, he flitted through the battlefield. As he leapt through the obstacles before him, his mind remained locked on the battle ahead of him, though things were already seemingly in motion. Number of potential targets, reduced from 7 to 5, 5 to 4, 4 to 3. It seemed as if with each step, he took another target signal fell, combatants being dispatched with unprecedented speeds. Ordinarily for such a bloody and brutal form of combat, that would be commonplace, especially with such a large group. However, what caught the stranger's eye and interest was that prior to approaching he took note that one of the energy signatures seemed slightly stronger than the others from before, and it was that same signature that was currently laying waste to the 7 remaining combatants. A loud scream alerted the stranger that he was near, effectively breaking his concentration for a moment. Though it didn't matter at this point as he alighted only a few feet away. Quickly ducking into the shadows, his eyes scanned the field below him and acted with internal surprise at the sight before him. 7 similarly dressed individuals, all laid about on the ground, each covered in injuries of varying degrees of severity, blood flowing out of each of them in large and potentially hazardous amounts. Weapons similarly adorned the ground around and near them, some seemingly whole, while others were all but shattered, broken, and reduced to little more than shards of metal. His eyes quickly intensified their scan, promptly locating the only remaining signature that remained strong enough in the area. There, standing seemingly triumphant among the bodies of her defeated opponents, stood a young girl, seemingly around 17 years of age, with long blonde hair and blue eyes, clad in a long red and white, gold-trimmed dress and brown boots. In her hand, however, was one of the oddest weapons the stranger's eyes had ever seen. It had the appearance of a massive single blade, yet it was mid-handled, held predominantly in a reverse grip, with the majority of the blade pointing upwards towards the girl's shoulder in a bracing stance. To further add to the girl's already substantial intimidation factor, there was a seemingly dead, borderline sociopathic look in her eyes. It almost looked as though her mind was completely focused into a single-minded pursuit, that drive being battle and carnage, to crush any opponent that stood before her, and proceed to cut them down to any degree in order to keep them from advancing. Observation: the Pandora clad in red appears far stronger than the others seen upon the battlefield. Her energy level is surprisingly high, and her mental state, based on what I can see, indicates a lack of regard for personal safety or remorse towards those she fights, be they Nova or even her own allies. Determination: threat level, mid to high level. Further observation is required. Well, guess we're the only ones left, huh? The stranger's focus quickly diverted from the blonde Pandora, locking on another girl who seemed to appear out of nowhere and make it past his sensors. A substantial feat. In terms of appearances, the girl was clad in the same uniform as the other warriors, her red hair done up in side braids with blue ribbons. Brown eyes shone from that heart-shaped face, glittering with such arrogance that caused the stranger to actually frown at her. In his estimation, a high opinion of honest self always resulted in casualties. The blonde Pandora seemed to share his sentiment, as she barely acknowledged the girl's presence, only returning her question with a slight turn of the head and a deepening frown upon her face. Though her grip on her oddly shaped blade had increased significantly, she stood still as a statue and made no move to strike. The redhead looked at the fallen warriors who had tried and failed to fell the stronger red Pandora, laughing slightly at the sight. "You certainly made a mess of things here. I have to say though, I figured you'd have a little more restraint since this is meant to be a combatant exercise and simulation. Don't want to actually kill or cripple anyone now, do we? Again, the blonde Pandora said nothing, though this time she actually turned her entire body to face the redhead, raising her right arm slightly so as to better guard herself in the event of an attack. Still keeping with the silent treatment I see, the redhead said in a manner meant to indicate mocking, as she carelessly shrugged her shoulders. No big deal, I guess, not like we're expected to communicate with the people we fight. The blonde Pandora quickly raised her guard as the redhead's face became battle-hardened and psychotic, opening her arms wide as 4 chains, tipped with heavy metal spikes, appeared on her back. So, let's just skip the pleasantries and get right on to the part where I rip you apart and take the number 1 spot. Shall we, Miss Untouchable Queen? Without another thought, the redhead launched herself at the blonde Pandora, chains following at high speed, while the stranger continued to watch in interest. Observation: the chain-wielding Pandora is showing signs of great confidence in her fighting capabilities, yet the energy I'm sensing from her doesn't even come close to matching those of the Pandora, now classified as Queen. Similarly, her emotional state, while intense, does not exhibit the same level of concentration and focus of Queen, making it unlikely she will be defeated. His words seemed to ring true, as the redhead and the blonde-haired Queen leapt all across the battlefield at one another. As expected of one wielding such a strange weapon, the red-haired girl launched her chains in every direction, attempting to skewer the blonde. Yet with precise movement and impressive grace, her adversary easily evaded or deflected each attack launched at her. The battle continued with no apparent end, as the pair seemingly made it to the border of the battleground. Queen currently had her back pinned to the wall, yet was showing no clear signs of fatigue, while the red-haired chain wielder was currently breathing somewhat heavily, but had not lost her grand-standing confidence. Well, Miss Queen, looks like you've run out of places to run. Guess it's finally time I dethroned you. With a ferocious roar, the girl launched all 4 of her chains simultaneously at the blonde Pandora. The speed at which they flew also seemed to have increased, as the blonde target of the attack could not evade in time, but quickly mustered a defense consisting of her massive blade, placing it before her body. The bladed chains collided with the blade, unleashing an ear-splitting screech as the blonde girl was sent rocketing through the wall, crashing against it with bone-shattering impact, actually breaking through the wall itself and flying beyond the field limits. The redhead unleashed a rather unsettling laugh at her attack. So much for being untouchable. Now I just have to finish her off and I'll be the queen around her. She quickly proceeded to fly through the hole in the wall after her target. The stranger took note of the sight before overlooking the field he remained on, observing what appeared to be several airborne vehicles, i.e., helicopters, descending upon the field. Overall assessment: battle simulation seems to have concluded, yet target known simply as Queen seems to remain standing within the contest along with the chain wielder. Due to her current threat level, it would be wise to pursue her further to gather additional information. Additionally, multiple energy signatures are approaching the field, likely to perform medical treatment on the wounded. Best to leave now to avoid compromising the mission. With that last thought, the stranger quickly sped forward, exiting through the hole formed by the last 2 combatants as he made his way towards their continued fight. Picking up on his intended target's respective energy signatures was relatively easy. Primary Queen's, as despite the consistent battles, her energy remained strong, while the chain wielders seemed to quickly be fading with each second. Within milliseconds, the mysterious watcher found himself hiding on the ceiling of what he could only assume was part of the massive school in which the battlefield resided in. Looking down, he quickly regained his bearings and focus on the 2 fighters. The red-headed chain wielder looked pretty worse for wear, her clothing being ripped to shreds, leaving her mostly in her underwear, with plenty of cuts on her body. Her disheveled state was further accentuated by a maddened look in her eyes, glaring down on the blonde-haired Queen with rampant fury. Speaking of the Queen, despite being blasted through a wall and fighting for several more seconds with the girl, she remained unscathed. There wasn't so much as a speck of dirt or hair out of place. Fascinating. Continued evaluation of the one called Queen further reveals she has great skill in combat, remaining unharmed despite fighting numerous battles. Threat level seems more suited to high rather than mid-level. The pair seemed prepared to square off again, when the sound of footsteps quickly diverted the watcher's attention as he heard the words, "It's you, isn't it, Kazuha?" His gaze quickly zeroed in on a young, presumably 16-year-old teenager, with short blue hair and brown eyes running towards Queen, meriting a more intense gaze. New subject approaching. Physically he appears unimpressive. No muscle or apparent combat training prevalent give his appearance. Likewise his mental state seems rather fragile or innocent, simply put naive. What exactly is he? As if like a domino effect, the watch saw, with a mixture of fascination and confusion, as the blue-haired boy quickly hugged the blonde girl from behind. Though a few missteps, caused by the girl's own confusion at the situation, she promptly fell on her back, with the boy's face directly in her chest. Naturally, being such a hardened warrior, one would expect the queen to respond with violence, potentially strike, or even severely injuring the young boy. Instead, her face of calm concentration was replaced with a look of sheer panic and terror, practically begging the teen to get off her. Rather than comply, he remained latched on tight, which in turn resulted in the red-haired chain wielder to take advantage of the opening and strike the downed blonde, specifically in the eye. Her scream echoed throughout the halls, and several people started to take note of the situation. However, the observer didn't seem the least bit interested, instead going over what he'd just seen in his head. Strange, all prior experience shows the one called Queen as a highly capable warrior and combatant, able to fend off attacks from armed warriors without so much as flicker of fear in her eyes. Yet a single touch from such an unimpressive being as that boy, and she suddenly becomes completely helpless. Strange. The actions of the red-headed one, however, unsettling. Temporary intervention deemed necessary. Frowning, he pointed one finger forward, thumb rising behind it in the parody of a toy gun. One eye squeezed itself shut as he concentrated. A thin current of energy began to gather at the edge of his fingertip. Counting the seconds, he resolved his aim and squeezed the trigger. In his mind, an imaginary hammer came crashing down, releasing the energy he'd held in check. Ting! The bullet of wind rocketed forward without so much as a sound, striking unerringly at the queen's opponent before she could follow up her foul attack. It was a clean through and through, piercing her stomach, but for whatever purposes, his sneak attack seemed to spur the queen into motion. Lashing out with her weapon, she furiously carved a crimson trench into her opponent, sending her tumbling away in a shower of BLD. Oddly, the watcher found this sudden display of brutality amusing. Interesting. He continued to ponder this for a moment, watching as the queen and the other young girl was quickly taken away, leaving the boy looking on in horror at the cold murder that had just taken place. The watcher gave the blonde girl one last look. These recent events demands further study to better understand what exactly just took place. However, today's observations must cease, as continued surveillance may very well result in exposure. With that, he promptly vanished again, quietly moving throughout the high points of the building, quickly making his way towards the outside of the school itself. Overall assessment: Pandora seemed to have a great deal of fighting potential, with some, such as the one called Queen, being especially dangerous. Yet they also seemed somewhat fragile, either being easily felled by their own comrades or through other undetermined means. Hopefully continued observation will determine. "Hey, buddy!" The shadowy watcher looked behind him, finding three young girls staring at him, all clad in the same purple uniforms he saw the other Pandora from before wearing. One of the girls had red hair similar to the chain wielder, but it was not done in any fashion, save for being slightly longer in the back, while also having rather pale skin and brown eyes. The second had dark blue hair in a short ponytail and green eyes, while the third had rather long orange hair in a long ponytail. Of the three, the last was the only one with a different appearance, seemingly replacing the traditional uniform for a pair of shorts, sneakers, and a purple uniform top, exposing a good amount of her body to the world. The three girls all looked at the stranger with obvious wicked intent, each smirking with apparent interest as they slowly made their way towards him, gradually surrounding him. The red-haired girl, the apparent leader, spoke first. "Well, girls, it would appear we found ourselves an intruder on school grounds. Surely he must have known that this is private property and only students or staff are allowed on campus without a pass of some kind." The orange-haired girl chuckled at the comment. "And according to school rules, any intruders found on the premise must be brought to the headmistress's office when discovered, with force permitted if necessary." The blue-haired girl seemed to lick her lips at the prospect. "And since the three of us didn't get to participate in the carnival this year for our unsavory actions, we haven't had a good battle in a while." Each girl promptly summoned the same blue energy seen earlier to summon forth weapons. The redhead's weapon was a long, axe-like halberd, while the blue-haired girl summoned 2 chain flails and the orange-haired girl called forth 2 double-bladed swords. Quickly the trio encircled the stranger, eager to draw BLD. The stranger meanwhile seemed uninterested in the group, mind instead focused on a different matter. Subject has been discovered, risk of exposure no prevalent. Appropriate response. With a quick shift of the wrist, he slowly flexed his left hand, making a loud cracking sound as he did. The redhead looked on, laughing lightly at the sight. Well, seems we've got a tough guy on our hands, ladies. Guess that means we don't have to hold back. Each girl readied their weapons and charged. With a single gaze, he locked onto all 3 girls with his eyes, one last thought running through his head before they attacked. Terminate witnesses with extreme prejudice. Underscore 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 for the briefest second. Satellizer L. Bridget. Remaining good eye widened as she found herself drawn to a nearby window looking on for some unexplained reason. The feeling, however, was fleeting and vanished as quickly as it began. Her only thought was thus. What was that? Underscore 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 underscore. The slaughter was as short as it was brutal. A loud cough was heard as the orange-haired sword wielder, her eyes wide as saucers, toppled on her back unconscious, her broken blade stabbed into the ground, quickly fading away. Similarly, the blue-haired lass struck the dirt face first, eyes wide open for a single moment, some BLD leaking from her mouth, whilst her chain weapons were broken all across the ground. All the while the remaining Pandora slowly found herself hoisted off the ground and into the air. Her axe lay broken in twine, with the intruder's hand wrapped firmly around her head, squeezing with intense pressure that made it feel like her skull was going to cave in on her at any moment. She couldn't even manage a scream, having been quickly struck in the throat by her attacker before he caught her in this position. She could only hang there, quivering as he looked upon her with a pair of dead, almost machine-like eyes. Witnesses incapacitated, to be terminated in order to ensure exposure of subject is prevented. That cold, robotic voice caused the girl to squirm in panic, trying desperately to manage a scream only to produce practically inaudible whispers. His hand quickly tightening around her head as her panic grew and her squirming increased. However, she promptly ceased her struggles when he spoke, hoping against hope. Almost immediately her world went black, body crumpling as a result of a strong strike to the abdomen. Her body was dropped unceremoniously into the ground itself. The stranger left looking at the 3. Any termination of witnesses would result in likely exposure of subject as well, which must be avoided for now. Thus countermeasure must be employed. He then proceeded to flip the girl over and latch his hand onto her head. Though he used his left hand, which upon closer inspection one would note was completely covered in bandages, obscuring it from view. Once his grip was established, the arm seemed to glow for a single instant, and the girl appeared to physically cringe before settling down. He repeated this process with the other 2 before taking another glance at them. Eyes. Countermeasure successful. Information and memory pertaining to this encounter has been removed. Observation can continue without fear of retaliation. With that he promptly and swiftly made his way to exit the campus and return to his original hiding spot, taking one last note of the day's events. Of the subjects observed so far, Queen appears the most vital target to best assess the strength of the Pandora. We'll continue observation of her and report findings when satisfactory data has been gathered. Once said objective is complete, annihilation of the Pandora will be a success. Light filled a rather dark, empty room, in which 3 individuals stood. 2 of them were currently standing in front of a desk, where the 3rd sat, clearly indicating the difference in rank between the 3. The 2 stood quietly, while their superior officer looked over some documents placed on her desk, her eyes scanning over every word, careful not to miss a single detail. After a few tense moments of scanning, the woman let out a sigh as she brought her eyes up to meet those of the other two. Her gaze was rather blank, but still held a serious air about it. "You're certain the information here is accurate? I don't wish to question neither yours nor the credibility of our security system. However, what you are suggesting is rather disturbing to think about." The two women stiffened slightly at the words, both shown to be women in the late 20s to early 30s. One of them had short black hair, in a light blue top with a navy blue tie, navy blue skirt, leggings and black shoes, and she chose to speak first. "I'm afraid it's the only plausible explanation we have given the circumstance. The three were found badly beaten, and the security footage we were able to recover from the scene seems to all but assure our suspicions." The woman behind the desk, an older woman in her 40s in a white nun-like outfit, hardened her gaze somewhat as she perched her chin on her now interlocked fingers as she looked on. "What about the condition of the three students found at the scene? Were there any serious injuries?" Her gaze quickly shifting to the other woman in the room, who was a slightly taller woman, with long green hair done in a ponytail, wearing a white lab coat over a purple top and skirt, with tan leggings and boots. The apparent medic quickly held up a clipboard looking it over. The three girls sustained some injuries, but nothing too serious. Mostly a few broken ribs and some bruises, but nothing their stigmata can't heal in a day or so. Thus there is no danger for serious or life-threatening injuries. Her assessment earned a look of relief from the seated woman, her visage softening somewhat. "That's good to hear. Not only for them, but if 3 second-year Pandora were suddenly critically injured, it would run the risk of sending the entire school into a panic. I wouldn't be so sure we're out of the woods yet." The green-haired medic quickly spoke with an unnerving tone in her voice. Her compatriot looked at the woman with a hint of uneasiness. "What do you mean by that, Elise? Is there something else?" The now identified Elise nodded. "While their physical condition wasn't anything too serious, I'm somewhat worried about their mental state. I had interviewed all three when they woke up and asked them about what happened, but they apparently had no clear memory of what transpired or who attacked them." She quickly shifted through the notes in her clipboard before stopping at one page and turning it to show the others present. "I decided to conduct a CAT scan on the three to find the source of the problem. To put it simply, it seems that whoever or whatever attacked them more than likely erased their short-term memory of the experience, though it doesn't seem like it will cause any permanent damage." Her words returned the uneasiness to her superior. "Yumi, what about the security footage? Were they able to pick up anything?" Yumi, however, only shook her head, quickly pulling down a holographic screen in the room, a large picture forming in the center. "Unfortunately, Sister Margaret, all we managed to get are a few shadows and shapes. The video seems to be experiencing some kind of interference, possibly from the attack." With a few hand movements, the picture quickly shifted, showing a rather static-laced image where the three girls were somewhat visible, seemingly confronting another figure whose entire appearance was covered in darkness and barely noticeable. As you can see, we are able to at least see part of the confrontation at first. Seems the three came across the attacker and who they prepared to subdue. As Yumi spoke the video, what was visible showed the three readying their weapons and preparing to charge. However, just before any of the actual combat begins, the entire picture quickly turned into nothing but static, lasting for several seconds before clearing up completely, now revealing a clear field, with the unconscious bodies of the three girls the only things present in the field. It would appear that whatever it was wanted to make sure it wasn't seen and somehow managed to remove any memories and video of its existence. In other words, we're pretty much chasing a ghost or shadow at this point. Sister Margaret frowned at the footage, both for the lack of clear evidence they were able to pull from it and the knowledge that there was an extremely dangerous figure lurking around the school. Just going by its behavior, it's clear this intruder knows the school's layout and is more than capable of handling Pandora. More to the point, if we take any kind of precautions, there's no telling what course of action it might take. That doesn't leave many options. Quietly musing to herself, the school's headmistress stood up from her seat and made her way to the window looking upon the school, unnerved by the fact there was someone concealing himself within the school. "Yumi, Elise, for now this information doesn't leave this room. We can't run the risk of starting a panic when we have so little information to go off of. Also, if this individual is smart enough to erase all memories of its existence from witnesses, then any measures we take will just make it act more cautiously and possibly impossible to locate." The two teachers frowned at the notion, not the least bit thrilled about concealing such dangerous information from the students or faculty. What should we do then? We can't just wait around for whatever this thing is to strike. It might end up killing someone if we don't act now. Yumi spoke with passion in her voice, her worry for the students clearly obvious. The headmistress, however, shook her head. I sincerely doubt that will happen. If this intruder wanted to simply kill the students, then it would have disposed of the three from earlier. It's more likely gathering information and doesn't want to be discovered, meaning it will do everything possible to stay concealed. We simply have to wait for it to either make a move or a misstep, then we can take action. Turning to face the two, she noted the uncomfortable looks present on both of them. I know this isn't the best solution, but we must remember in battle, sometimes we must sit and wait for the enemy to act before we attack. Patience is just as important in combat as strength. She quickly shifted to a small smile to lighten the mood. Now then, you two should report back to class. We can't have the students thinking something is amiss with the teachers disappearing now, can we? The two women wordlessly nodded, bowing to the headmistress before exiting through the door. Once gone, the headmistress's smile dropped as she once again turned to the window, looking about the school that was currently bathed in the warm glow of the afternoon sun, the sounds of laughing and chattering students filling the air. Yet despite the serene setting, Sister Margaret could practically feel an icy chill run throughout her body, eyes continuously looking all over the school, looking for the slightest twitch of a shadow, unable to fully relax knowing there was something out there, ready to strike. However, for now all she could do was return to her work, waiting to see what would happen, yet still unable to shake the cold feeling of dread that lingered over her head. What exactly is going on here? Underscore 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 miles away from the campus, nestled safely within the mountains, a young man began the arduous process of cleaning his body from the stains that marred it. Not his, of course. There's those he'd beaten. Strong hands, one wrapped in black bandages, the other a healthy human tan, dipped into the basin smoothly and emerged with cupping a handful of water. He paused, staring down at his reflection. Bright blonde, molten gold hair framed his whiskered visage, chin-length bangs drifting softly in the wind. He contemplated his reflection in the liquid for a moment. Mismatching eyes stared back at him from within his whiskered face. One a serene blue calm, the other an eerie, soulless gold, shaped more like a warped star than an actual iris. Its clear darkened to blackness. One could see that this eye clearly differentiated from the other in more than just base appearance alone. It was part of the tissue they'd grafted onto him so long ago. It was a biological camera of sorts. Everything it saw was relayed back to its brethren within their dimension and served as a pseudo-link between him and its MSTR. Occasionally, it would even return their sentiments. Oddly enough, they were actually pleased by the actions he had taken today. They liked the idea of him proving her superiority to the weaker creatures, and they approved of the actions he had taken to maintain his anonymity. Observation could continue, but the actions taken toward the Queen, of intervening on her behalf, were deemed as problematic. Such a simple little word, and yet it perfectly described the state of his mental being in that moment. He still had to remind himself that he existed sometimes. That this changed, upgraded body wasn't just a shell of some sort, that it maintained a physical consciousness beyond the orders branded into the back of his brain. He wondered if he'd done the right thing by sparing those three. Perhaps it would have been better to simply slay them and be done with it. He splashed some water onto his face, cleaning it of BLD. It washed away easily enough, but the tiny seed of guilt planted in his chest lingered, persisted. Was it wrong then that he had enjoyed beating those Pandora down as he had? That he, Naruto, had actually enjoyed himself? Combat was a rare treat for him, one that allowed him feel like a true individual when there was none. There was a beauty to battle that made you forget everything and everything. BGMI. He spasmed slightly. Thinking of the name, his identity, always sent a tiny jolt of pain through his mind as his MSTR cracked the WHP. Part of him reveled in it. They couldn't control him, not completely, and they disapproved of the idea of him thinking of himself as an individual. He was they were him. There was no individual. They were one. He had but to look at his left arm to remember that. They'd improved him. He still lived because of them. His mortal body should have crumbled away a long time ago, but they kept him alive. He wasn't human. Yet at the same time he wasn't Nova either. He was something in between. A hybrid, maybe. He was an outcast. Queen fascinated him. Her skills marked her as a target, one he should eliminate. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He was certain his MSTR would approve. But in the end, it changed nothing. Human or Nova, he knew he couldn't afford to feel anything beyond curiosity. To do so was to stray into disaster, and anything was better than that. He dimly recalled the last time he had dared to experience emotions, and the terrible pain that came with them. No, he would feel nothing. He would watch, yes, but not interfere. Never. Never again. Despite his recent reservations, however, his observation continued well into the evening. And it paid off in spades. Having managed to locate Queen again, he was treated to an even rarer sight towards the end of the day. The red-haired Pandora he'd helped Queen defeat prior, Gainessa Roland, hadn't taken her loss well. So not well, in fact, that she had seen fit to challenge the untouchable Queen to a rematch. She looked absolutely livid, her face red as her hair. A part of him thought it was a look that suited her, a reminder of a strange attraction he'd felt for those with red hair. The thought, the innocent humanity of it, surprised the watcher. He should not be thinking such things. His task was to observe. Nothing more. Any other odd thought was to be deemed traitorous and discarded. So he looked on, observing quietly as the scene played out beneath his feet. "I finally found you, little Miss Queen. We're not done yet, not by a long shot." Her aura flared along with her weapons appearing in a flash of blue behind her, while Queen looked on unimpressed by her little show of power. "The carnival's over, accept your loss, and you can still leave here with what little dignity you have." The blonde's cold tone only served to inflame her enemy's ire, as she let out an enraged scream. "Shut up! I don't know what exactly you did, but I know you cheated somehow during that battle. That's the only reason you beat me." The observer quietly processed all that he was witnessing. Observation: prior interference between Queen and now identified Gainessa Roland has resulted in further conflict between the two. Further observation reveals loyalty between Pandora is easily severed based on inconsequential factors such as pride. Possible weakness to exploit in the future. He continued to watch as others attempted to deactivate the situation, trying to get Gainessa to calm down. But it proved fruitless as the girl was all but foaming at the mouth at this point, unable to accept what happened. "I was finally going to be number one, but you just couldn't let go of the title, could you, MS Queen? Well, even if I can't be number one, I can still rip you apart." Without waiting for any confirmation from her fellow sophomore, the redhead activated her Volt weapon and lunged. Her chain attacks were sloppy, driven by rage and fury, almost unworthy of recording. By comparison, Queen, who'd quickly shifted on guard, was the picture of grace, swatting away the sharpened points with contemptuous ease. Her red-haired opponent's moves only grew more crude with each moment, and Queen was able to pick up on this with ease. Gainessa quickly grew rabid at her repeated failed strikes and promptly brought all 4 chain points together. "Just stay FC still and let me shred you." The quadrant of metal shot forward towards their target, yet both Queen and the observer could easily read into the attack. Without missing a beat, Queen quickly sped off to the right side of the oncoming blades, waiting until the very last second as they glided harmlessly by her, before lifting her massive blade and slamming it down like a guillotine on the exposed chains. The sharpened weapon cut clean through the chain, sending the bladed edges flying off into the plaza, with many students jumping out of the way. Without missing a beat, Queen quickly went into a crouch before rocketing forward at Gainessa like a cannon shell, promptly slamming her now outstretched arm into the girl's exposed abdomen and sending the now shocked girl hurtling into the wall several yards away. The observer again marveled at the girl's impressive skill and strategy. Analysis: Queen exploited opponent's mental state, waiting for her to make a reckless move that enabled Queen to completely neutralize her weapon, before following with a powerful physical strike that offered no means of retaliation. Ranking Queen as high threat level seems more appropriate at this time. However, his golden eye quickly registered an increase in energy levels from the large hole in the wall Gainessa was sent. The redhead in question had managed to pull herself out, though she looked even worse than before, her entire outfit having numerous tears that showed off a great amount of skin. along with her pigtails coming undone and BLD that caked her face. Added with a completely deranged look on her face, she appeared as though she just exited a particularly deadly battlefield. Enough. I don't care if it's forbidden. If it means I can take you down, then I don't care what the rules say. Pandora mode activate. Before his very eyes, her body was eclipsed by blue light, rocking through the yard to its very bones. That in and of itself wasn't impressive, but what followed next certainly. Girl's body was quickly covered in a dark red armor of sorts, obscuring every piece of skin that was once visible, topped off with a large helmet, complete with a visor. The only part of her body that was still visible were her hands, otherwise concealed by gauntlets, and her chain weapons has regenerated, once again hovering behind her back. System input. New information critical. New critical ability of Pandora learned. It appears that Pandora have a secondary form that they refer to as Pandora mode, which grants them a more heavily armored form as well as an increase in energy levels. Subject Gainus's strength has risen to a level closer to that of Queen. Narrowing his eyes as he turned to Queen, who seemed a tad surprised by the revelation, he contemplated what would happen next. Quandary: if this technique is common among Pandora, then it could prove a serious threat to future operations. Further observation required to learn about possible flaws in its design. Turning his attention back to the fight, he watched as there was a moment of terrible silence as Gainus glared bloody red daggers behind her visor at the untouchable Queen. Surprisingly, Satellaizer broke it herself. Annoying. Huh? What was that? It happened in an instant. One might have missed it if they'd blinked. But he didn't blink, both eyes trained unerringly upon the sight unfolding below him. Like Gainus, an identical display of red armor adorned Queen's form, though unlike her opponent her weapon had seemingly fused to her arm, whilst her long flowing blonde locks remained visible. However, what was truly impressive to the watcher was the power level increase. Where once the pair were somewhat evenly matched, now it was a kitten trying to fight a tiger. Before Gainus could even attempt a reply, a counter, or anything at all, it was over. Queen shot forward, her body little more than a blur of white light. Even in Pandora mode, Gainus proved unable to react in time. In a single flash of blue, Queen appeared behind Gainus, whose body erupted into several long deep cuts, causing her armor and weapons to fall broken on the ground before her. The defeated girl's now visible eyes fell to the back of her head, as she fell backwards in a heap. New observation. Queen's power in Pandora mode even exceeds those of other Pandora under similar conditions. Threat assessment of high level now deemed appropriate. Queen's skills and abilities continue to expand with each new assessment. Her potential seems to stand heavily amongst other Pandora. His golden eye continued to record each detail, sending it back to the Nova, yet his blue eye narrowed when he caught sight of Queen, now being held at knife point by two older individuals. The sight caused his black arm to glow slightly red, as if ready to strike. Yet a single jolt in the back of his mind quickly quelled that action, as he did as was told and continued to observe. Further observations reveal new data. Pandora mode is a forbidden tactic only to be used when necessary, and the current mode is outdated, indicating more advanced models may exist. Additionally, despite not being the instigator of the attack, Queen is being subject to a penalty for her actions. The stranger in the shadows paused momentarily as his voice changed. That doesn't make any sense. It was obviously self-defense, so why is she being punished? Would they just expect her to stand there and get ripped apart? The brief outburst, however, quickly subsided as his tone became more robotic, as his golden eye glowed. Regardless of this change, Queen has still shown the highest capability level of Pandora scene. Continued observation approved, though addition data on Pandora mode and the school is requested as soon as possible. Underscore 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 underscore. I can't believe Satellaizer acted so recklessly like that. She easily could have killed Gainus. I have half a mind to suspend her right now. Not like she started the fight after all. Besides, I already told you, the girl's wounds weren't as serious as they looked, and she'll be out of bed in another day or two. Be thankful it was just a minor scuffle between students. Meanwhile, Yumi and Elias were assessing the damage of what had just transpired in Elias's office. The nurse had just gone over Gainasa's medical chart, taking note of how obviously tense her comrade in arms was. I take it you were worried that this attack was perpetrated by our little hideaway, right? Not too often you see a teacher use a double XL to leave the faculty lounge. Yumi bit the underside of her lip as her mind flashed back to how she practically rocketed out the door the second she heard the explosion not too far off. Well, how would you react, knowing there is someone or something hiding out in this school, attacking students? Every second we don't do something, another student could be hurt. Elias merely put down her cup and leaned back in her chair, and getting paranoid about it won't be helping us. We need to be patient, otherwise we'll end up causing a panic like Sister Margaret said. Besides, I have a feeling our little friend will appear soon enough. What do you mean? Picking up a nearby clipboard, Elias flipped through a few pages before arriving at a specific one. I heard some students mention Gainasa screaming at Satellaizer, saying she cheated somehow in the carnival, which normally you'd write off as just a bruised ego. However, while I was doing an examination of her after the carnival, I noticed a rather large bruise near her lower back. Almost like she'd been hit by a high-speed projectile. Yumi's eyes widened as she ran forward and snatched the chart out of Elias' hands, and even got a look at the photo she'd taken of the bruise in question. You think maybe? I believe our intruder friend might not be as stealthy as he thinks. Either that, or he's making mistakes and hiding himself, and sooner or later, he'll slip up enough to where we'll be able to catch him. Underscore 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 HMPH. Having determined there was no more data worth collecting the previous day, the Watcher had opted to shut himself down for a time, hiding out atop one of the buildings. Thankfully, he wasn't spotted, due in part to his eye acting as an alarm system that would trigger should it detect anything hostile approaching. After the new day started, he returned to his data gathering, scanning over some of the other Pandora, only to find the bulk of them unimpressive based on their rather mediocre energy levels. None had come even close to matching the one known as Queen, and a lingering longing to see her further prompted him to seek her out. It turned out to be easy, finding her now sitting on the roof of nearby building, eating silently by herself. Curious. Despite her own power being something to be admired, Queen seems to intentionally isolate herself from others. Additional scanning has revealed she goes by the codename Untouchable, perhaps hinting at some reasoning behind this behavior. As he watched, however, he caught sight of a familiar pile of blue hair appearing behind the girl, causing his normally blank face to grow a deep frown and his arm to again glow a light red. Yet he restrained himself and listened into the conversation. Well, one-sided conversation with the boy, now named Kazuya, apparently asking Queen, now properly identified as Satellaizer, if she would allow him to be her limiter. A request she seemed adamant about refusing. Intriguing new development. Despite it being a requirement for all Pandora to be partnered with another human, Satellaizer refuses to do so. Further study indicates some deeper reason behind this restraint. Although, if you ask me, that kids should just take no for an answer and leave. His skill level is abysmal anyway. Again, he found his mind relapsing and adopting a more individualized perspective, a more human-like one. And despite all the information he'd amassed, he just couldn't identify why that was. More specifically, why it was Satellaizer that caused this reaction in him. Her animosity with Aoi Kazuya intrigued him. But there was more than idle curiosity here. Part of him longed to speak with her. What made those ice-blue eyes so hollow, so very much like his own? What foul trials and tribulations had conspired to make her this way? To shun all touch? He didn't understand it at all. It had only been 2 days, so why? Why was he so fascinated with her? Of course, couldn't bring himself to approach the Pandora, however, despite the aching longing growing stronger in his mind, fighting against the increasing jolts surging through. Would it be so wrong to speak with her and then erase her memory afterwards? Just once. He was sure that would be enough to purge himself of this foul temptation that seemed to plague him at every turn. As he contemplated his next course of action, his eyes quickly caught sight of several other individuals' appearance on the roof, most of which were 3 limiters, all unimpressive specimens. However, the last was another Pandora. However, she appeared to be older than Satellaizer, and just looking at her, the watcher could already tell by looking at her she was trouble. Her expression alone screamed arrogance on an even higher plateau than Gainasa, along with what appeared to be an almost depraved form of longing coming from her. However, despite her disdainful appearance, he could tell she was skilled, with an energy level that was actually higher than his blonde target. Not a massive gap, but enough to where a fight would likely go in her favor. Things only became more complicated when the little punk Kazuya got involved. Apparently this new Pandora, Miyabi wanted to make him her limiter, but he was only interested in Satellaizer, despite her own refusal. What exactly is that little punk's problem? Can't he take no for an answer and leave? Is he really that much of a dumbass? By this point, the emotions he was feeling were quickly becoming strong enough to override his normal programming as he watched with greater anger as Miyabi and Satellaizer began to fight. After the older girl claimed Satellaizer owed her respect as an upperclassman. Since when does rank or what year you are in school give you justification to attack somebody? You're supposed to be fighting for mankind, not to stroking your overinflated egos. Eventually thing quickly reached a fever pitch as Miyabi had her 3 limiters activate a freezing field that effectively pinned Satellaizer down, leaving her completely helpless, while Kazuya had been knocked aside during the fight. Normally he'd record the information he was watching, but his growing rage over the sordid series of events blinded him, watching as the powerless pair was held captive in the trio's freezing field. His temper odd how he hadn't felt it until this very moment flared as the third year fondled her breasts, hiked up her dress, and reached for her panties. By then his BLD, or what constituted as BLD in this body, was boiling at a feverish pitch. Error: this unit's duty is only to observe, not to interfere with matters. Doing so would compromise the very nature of this mission. His mind demanded coldly, uncaring of the situation. However, I can't just sit here and watch this happen. Nothing about this is right. His actual voice spoke for his heart, as the debate seemed to rage. However, the sight of Sattellaizer's panties being pulled down as a camera was brought out settled the argument in his emotions' favor by a landslide. One last electric bolt attempted to shut his mind down, but he fought past it, and with a dark red glow, he disappeared from the rooftop before his feet effortlessly found their place, only a few yards away from the conflict, alighting in plain sight for perhaps the first time since he'd begun his mission. Step away. Needless to say, his presence caused quite a stir. Satellaizer didn't know what she was looking at. He looked like a boy, though his face was completely concealed by a hood, save maybe for his one visible blue eye. What was really surprising was the fact he was currently standing in a freezing field and not show any indication it was affecting him. Her heart hammered like the drums of a great hunt, out for her BLD, and she could barely find it within herself to speak. But she was the first to react to his sudden presence. And speak she did. "Eh? Who are you?" His gaze turned slightly, registering her. No words were said, though for the briefest of moments his eye softened its gaze, causing her heart to almost skip a beat for some reason, though she ignored that though. Kazuya was slightly less coherent at the sight of the stranger. Huh? Naruto ignored him, instead making his way over to the still-down Satellaizer, ignoring the tethers of green-blue energy twining around his boots and gazes of the others present. He reached down and roughly hauled Satellaizer upright, dragging her to her feet. She flushed, almost cringed at the contact, but in spite of the swift, jerky movements, he didn't do anything else to her. Up close the blonde girl got a closer look at his eyes, as she could only barely see what appeared to be a yellow eye hidden in shadow. Regardless, his gaze had her rooted to the ground. Almost without a thought, he then raised his heel before stomping down imperiously, shattering the freezing field as effortlessly as one would breathe. Just like that, she could move again. Stay. A rough voice issued forth from his throat. Numbed, she managed a nod. Who the heck is that? Kaho whispered to Arthur from their hiding place, to which the first year instead posed another question. Forget about that. How was that guy able to not only walk through, but break a freezing field? I mean, he shouldn't be able to do that, right? However, neither first year would get an answer, as they both quickly ducked down when the intruder's chilling gaze swept over them. Thankfully for them, they weren't the intended targets, as he locked on to Miyabi. The Watcher himself took in their fearful gaze, along with Sattellaizer's. Despite his turbulent mindset, their fear was easy to understand. After all, a stranger with a body wrapped in black, a right arm completely sheathed in ebony bandages, only a single visible eye, currently leering furiously at the blue gnat responsible for his forced intervention. To her credit, the Pandora didn't squeal and soil herself like he'd thought she would. No. She had the audacity to smirk, regarding him as little more than a mote in the eye. She'd no idea of what was about to befall her. "Ara, what do we have here?" Miyabi purred. "It looks like an intruder." "Miyabi Kanazuki," he rumbled quietly, the flat voice of his monotone ringing across the open rooftop. "Assessment 3rd year, identifies as limiter glutton. Threat assessment insignificant." In the same instant that he spoke, he twisted aside, a dagger flying harmlessly past his visage. Mismatching eyes regarded her with cold curiosity. Addendum: ill temperament, boastful and arrogant. A complete lack of decorum, and of an utterly wretched personality that renders any outward beauty worthless. He wasn't sure what caused him to say those words, yet he was prompted him to rile her so. Overall individual assessment, a beach, regardless, the words produced the desired effect. "What did you call me?" Her knife carved through empty air, touching only the breeze as he drifted around it effortlessly, gliding backwards in retreat. His boot shot out like greased lightning and aimed for her jaw, only to find a forearm move between him and his mark. Analysis, highly flawed personality and behavior, still possessed some degree of skill. Too much for countermeasures to be effective. However, this little revelation didn't deter him. On the contrary, somewhere in the dark corridors of his soul, he felt a touch of excitement. Appropriate course of action determined, deploying countermeasure 1. His right arm shifted, bristling with crimson stigmata. Red light bloomed from it, forming a monstrous zanbato, the handle of which fell into his hand. Black and double-bladed, as large as he was tall, it sank into the rooftop as swiftly as it had been summoned, nearly burying itself to the causing some to jump in shock at just how much the thing weighed. Of course, the real thing entering all their minds was, how can he summon a Volt weapon? He's not a Pandora. However, Miyabi's own personal ego pushed this rather pressing question down and instead opted to save face. "Oh," Miyabi scoffed at this. "And what are you going to do with that sword? There's no way you can fight with a weapon like that." Her words ended in a tiny squeak of fear as the blonde moved. Then, to her infinite dismay, he reached down with his bandaged arm and yanked the ungodly weapon free, hoisting it high as though it weighed no more than a feather. To the horror of all present, he started forward. Click. No word was offered as his boots dragged across the ground. He simply began walking, uncaring as her limiters created a new freezing field which reached out in a desperate attempt to restrict his movements. All they could do was peer into the stranger's virtually unseen face and feel their BLD freeze as his ice blue eye locked onto them. Target acquired. Will terminate with extreme prejudice. One of the limiters only managed to squeak out a response. What are you? No data available. There was another, quiet click as his booted feet flew free from the pavement, punctuated by a sudden rush of wind, and he was gone. Miyabi started, instinctively raising an arm in defense of the unexpected technique and the sheer speed behind it. It can't be, that was an Excel? But that's impossible, he's not a Pandora. In an instant, he was both upon and past her. He reappeared less than a foot away from the nearest limiter, his body coiled and ready to spring forward at the shocked student. Too late she turned, realizing she wasn't his target. Poor boy, he didn't even have a chance to scream before his left and right arms dropped from his body in a puddle of his own BLD, twitching to the ground, while he fell to the ground in shock. His second fared little better, succumbing to a lunging stab that nearly bifurcated him, but thankfully only the tip of the sword dug into him. Yet that was enough for the black blade to stain the ground once more in a great gout of gore. The third tried to turn and run, only for a fist to place itself in the face of the unprepared limiter, sending him sprawling into his companions, thankfully the least injured of the group. Looking down, he caught sight of the camera used to take the defacing photos of Satellizer, not moments ago. The sight of the horrid image on the screen made his BLD boil hotter as his bandaged arm erupted with red light, before he swiftly drove the massive blade into the phone, driving it almost completely into the roof. He then silently released his hold on the blade, turning his attention to his real target, Miyabi. No. Reacting quickly to this, Miyabi blasted backwards in a brief and blinding flash of Excel, desperately trying to put up some distance between the stranger and herself until she could figure out what to do next. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. He was a boy. He shouldn't be able to use a Volt weapon. He shouldn't be able to use Excel. He shouldn't. Zip. The stranger's form, as if omnipresent, appeared directly in her path. Miyabi's jaw dropped, aghast at the man's new speed. She quickly took off in the opposite direction as fast as she could in Anoth blue flash of an Excel. Yet effortlessly, the blonde intercepted her with his own red Excel. Those eerie eyes held her, riveted her. The Pandora shrieked. "What the hell are you?" Subject is increasingly hostile. He mused aloud, turning aside. Lethal force required. Shut up. Sparks erupted around her hands as she summoned a pair of daggers and charged, smashing into him with a barrage of powerful slashes and kicks. Yet her opponent was able to easily block and evade each blow. The captive audience could just hear a tiny rumble. Only Satellizer could even make out the individual blows. Truthfully, however, in the intruder's mismatched eyes, the blows were coming in slow motion. Every move Miyabi made was analyzed, assessed, and picked apart with ease. He knew where to guide his arms and elbows to block or deflect each strike. After another moment of blocking, he decided to retaliate and launched a bone-shattering punch to the girl's chest, causing her bravado to leave her and finally dropping her daggers to the ground, while falling to her knees, gasping as she clutched her now severely fractured chest. "How did you?" Whap. The blonde's hand flicked outward, catching Miyabi in his side in a knifing motion. The impact flung her down in a perfectly straight line into the fence of the rooftop, well past where a fearful Arthur and Kaho all but cowered. The former yelped at the impact. The whole building shook, and still she hung there, her mouth hanging open, lips parted to form a small, round O of surprise, whilst BLD flowed out. Yet her brief moment was ripped away along with her body, as her opponent appeared before her before grabbing her violently by the neck and hoisting her up. Stow. Concrete broke before her back as he slammed her down, shattering her spine. Pure agony raced up her back. Despite the pain, despite the anguish, she still managed to find her voice. "Stop," she begged anew, tears welling in her eyes. "Please." Disgusting. The word tore from his lips with a feral growl as he promptly ripped his weapon out of the roof and approached Miyabi, raising it like an executioner. "Filthy. Unclean," he struck at her with frightening dispassion, his weapon plunging through her stomach and her chest, all but carving a bloody trench through her stigmata and flesh side in a shower of gore. So large was the weapon that the hapless Pandora found herself completely frozen, unable to even make the tiniest of moves. Numb, she quietly flopped to the floor, dimly registering the slight turning of the blade. Terminating. BLD spattered as his weapon sank through flesh, and then the concrete beneath it drilling her into the very building itself. Miyabi vomited BLD. He was minutely aware of shouts of panic ringing in his ears, but it all sounded so far away everything was muffled in his mind. There was only the rage as the thoughts of all the girl had caused erupted through his mind. It consumed him and flowed through him, empowering him. Miyabi tried in vain to beg, but he roared at her, and she fell silent with a tiny whimper of fear. Twisting the blade in the wound, he prepared to finish the pitiful Pandora. And the rooftop door flung itself open. "What's going on here?" His golden eye quickly turned to identify the approaching enemy, and the sight immediately shattered his rage, replacing it with dread. That was when he saw her. Chiffon Fairchild. Danger, danger, danger. Every fiber of his being tensed in preparation. Her energy level was beyond anything that he had seen. The Nova had warned him of this individual. A being equal or greater to the level of power, he could command a monster hidden behind a meek facade. He wasn't prepared. Wasn't ready. Her presence snapped him back to the present like a slap to the face. Fight or flight warred within him, and this time it was the latter who succeeded. Threat level, extreme. Immediate curse of action, retreat. Danger, danger. Threat level extreme, immediate retreat. The stranger felt thousands of alarms go off inside his head. The instant his gaze caught sight of the slit-light eyes and seemingly unimpressive face of Chiffon Fairchild. Despite her appearance being no different from any other girl seen, he'd been briefed on her before being dispatched, about how her meek visage was only a facade for the monster beneath the surface. And now he surely believed the claims. Her energy level alone compared to Satellizer or Miyabi was like comparing a cup of water to the oceans. He knew he had no chance at this time and escape was his only option. Thus he was quick to release his hold on his massive blade, quickly leaping back to the edge of the roof, his sense of panic increasing at the sight of another strong Pandora with long blue hair appearing behind her, both focused on him. "Whoever you are, if you think you can simply come in here and brutally attack a student, you are gravely mistaken." Chiffon quickly surveyed the carnage that had befallen Miyabi as she prepared to attack. However, she wasn't able to get more than an inch before the intruder spoke. "Threat level extreme, immediately retreat demanded." She couldn't even get a word in as to her and Taisi's shock. The strange male was cloaked in crimson energy before literally disappearing in a flash. An acceleration. Taisi could only gasp in shock at what they just witnessed. How's that possible? Chiffon, however, had other thoughts on her mind. That wasn't just any acceleration. The speed he moved was comparable to a double or triple accel at the very least. Yet by the look of things I'd swear there was a normal accel for him. Taking another glance at the situation at hand, before gazing to the spot where he teleported away, at that speed it wouldn't be impossible for me to catch him. However, if he's able to cause this much destruction and move at that kind of speed at a base level, I imagine he has more power than he showcased. A fight could cause more damage than needed. Her debate, however, was abruptly halted by Taisi, who made her way to Miyabi and was trying to apply some degree of low-level first aid to the girl. "Chiffon, we need to hurry. I don't know how long she'll hold out for. We need to get her to the emergency room now." Quietly nodding, Chiffon took another glance to the location where the stranger disappeared from. "I'd better report to Sister Margaret after all this has been taken care of. She'll want the full details also." Her gaze shifted to the three freshmen and one sophomore still seated in shock over what transpired. "I need to collect whatever kind of testimony I can from them. Hopefully they can give me an idea of just what we're up against here." Underscore 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 bzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzzz Watcher clutched his burning scalp in pain, whilst far more powerful jolts coursed through his mind. Lashing out with his blackened arm, he reduced several nearby trees to little more than splinters, as the agonizing pain continued to sear his mind further and further. Eventually, he fell to his knees, though to his relief the pain finally ceased. Thanks to his right eye acting as a camera, the Nova had seen everything the young man had done in the last few hours, specifically the intentional exposure of his presence, aiding a Pandora, and then fleeing the scene with several eyewitnesses, whose memories remained intact. True, the Nova were infamous for being anything but subtle in this instance. They found it necessary to try a less direct approach to fighting their enemies, and using a single stealth operative had been their solution, and it had worked fine up until this point. Now the humans were aware, and that would effectively ruin or hinder any further progress they would have. Analysis: my presence has been exposed to several of the Pandora. However, I myself have not been captured, nor do they have the means to track me. Thus, I can continue with my mission despite this minor setback. The Nova, however, weren't as certain as they knew from experience that Pandora had an unfortunate tendency to become smarter with every attack, and they would surely be on guard this time around. There was also the issue of the Pandora themselves. As powerful as Satelizer was, it was clear Miyabi would have likely beaten her had it not been for her arrogant attitude, and given the presence of Chiffon Fairchild, who apparently was in the same class ranking as Miyabi, then it was likely there were Pandora of similar strength levels, far more capable than Satelizer was. Simply put, there were so many unknown factors that his exposure seemed like too great a risk. However, the Watcher wasn't in agreement on this matter, partially because he was programmed to go through with his mission to the end, but there was also the fact a small part of his human side remained despite the shocks. Statement: despite my compromised position, there is still a great deal more useful information that can be gathered about the Pandora. Despite the risks, it seems crucial to continue with the mission. Again, the Nova were not in agreement with this decision, due to the very real risk factor that Chiffon posed to the mission. True, my current strength is not comparable to that of Fairchild. However, I have not displayed the full range of my abilities, and if necessary I am confident that my emergency fail-safe measure will be more than sufficient to deal with her. His bandage-covered arm quickly radiated intense crimson light, acting as a minor supplement to his statement. He sat there awaiting a response while taking a look at his remaining human hand, which was still caked in the BLD of the harlot Pandora he'd gone out of his way to brutalize. Conundrum. There was no data or value to be gained by attacking that girl and revealing myself. I intentionally endangered my mission, simply to provide aid to the one known as Satellizer. Continuing to stare at his own human hand, the small emotional core that remained inside him started to return to the surface. But I had to do it. I couldn't just sit there and let her be abused like that. It was the right thing to do. Illogical. I was restored to help ensure the survival of the Nova, and thus have relinquished any semblance of humanity that remains inside of me. Concepts such as nobility have long been removed. No, I know that's not true. I helped Satellizer because it was the right thing to do, if nothing else because of some attraction I seem to have for her. Incorrect. Satellizer is only a means for gathering data, and nothing more. Any interest we have for her in only in the pursuit of our mission. How long can we keep lying to ourselves? You can't keep your humanity buried forever. Even if they've stripped away a good chunk of it, there is still plenty about us that's still human. His emotional side would have continued only to effectively be locked away by another deep jolt, with some talk of further mental modification being thrown in. He was then relayed his new assignment from the Nova. With a nod, he turned his golden eye to the school. Understood. New mission assigned. As they seem to be the strongest class of warriors at this school based on relevant data. I will now collect any information I can on these third years to see what they are capable of and the best means by which to counteract their abilities. His Nova Eye quickly shifted itself to a scanner across the school, now searching for any potential targets with which to gather relevant data. Once his gaze zeroed in on the closet high-energy source, he prepared to move. New target acquired, commencing reconnaissance. With another red Excel flash, he disappeared. Underscore 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 unbelievable. Wham! I can't believe we let this happen. Yumi promptly slammed her fist against a nearby wall as she stood outside the emergency center. Word had quickly spread about the attack on Miyabi, who'd been wheeled into surgery almost immediately, with her chances of survival being abysmal to say the least. Sister Margaret had also appeared, having heard of the attack, with Chiffon also standing nearby to help provide insight into what had taken place. You're certain that this wasn't simply the result of some scuffle between the students? Given that it involved Miss L. Bridget, I wouldn't be too surprised for things to go this way, especially with Miyabi involved. Sister Margaret questioned Chiffon, making it a point to eliminate all doubts, as given the personalities of two of the parties involved, it wasn't impossible that it was another fight between them. However, the headmistress's hopes were dashed as Chiffon's expression remained the same. I'm certain of it. Even though I arrived after the fight had ended, it was obvious the one who caused Miss Miyabi's injuries was a male I've never seen before. Her frown deepened as she recalled the events. I was unable to pursue him, as Miyabi required immediate attention. I apologize for my misstep. Sister Margaret only dismissed her thoughts. You have nothing to apologize for. Your first priority should be to ensure the safety of your was no lapse in your judgment. That is simply something that comes about on the battlefield. Yumi by this point decided to chime in and add her own 2 cents to the mix, pushing off from the wall and turning to Chiffon. So what exactly can you tell us about him? Any information at this point would be useful. From what little I saw, it's clear this man is no ordinary human. The fact he could defeat a third year like Miyabi single-handedly alone is proof enough of that. I caught sight of him wielding an exceeding heavy sword, not unlike a Volt weapon. Thus it's apparent his strength is significantly greater than a normal human. His expression seemed to become more morbid to such the others felt unnerved by what she had to say. He also displayed abilities matching those of a Pandora, specifically an acceleration. That's impossible. To date, there's never been any recorded instance of a male Pandora being even remotely feasible. Any attempt made was never successful, much less one that could use a high-end skill like an Excel. I assure you, Miss Kim, I couldn't believe it either, but I know what I saw. However, what's especially troubling is that his Excel seemed significantly faster than a normal Pandora's. Its speed was comparable to a double or even triple Excel. I fear that he may be more powerful than we can imagine. Yumi seemed ready to charge out into the school to hunt the stranger down, but maintained her composure as she adopted an inquisitive posture. If he managed to move using an acceleration, I wonder if it'd be possible to lock onto him somehow. We've used similar means to track Pandora, so if he's using similar techniques it might work. This notion seemed promising until Sister Margaret chimed in. That may be, but it's likely he's just as aware of this as we are and won't simply use his abilities on a dime. Perhaps, but at least keeping the scanners on will allow us to actually respond to his next attack much quicker and maybe capture him this time. Both teachers nodded before turning attention to Chiffin. For now, Chiffin, keep this information to yourself and Taisi. But why? If word got out that there was an intruder who somehow managed to overwhelm and critically injure a third year, then other students would likely try to hunt the individual themselves. We have no clear idea of his capabilities, and this would more than likely lead to additional injuries and death as well. Also, the more attention drawn to him, the more well hidden he'll make himself. I trust you can do this. Both the president and vice president offered nods in response, though Taisi's was clearly more hesitant. That's good. We shouldn't worry too greatly. We'll capture this intruder soon enough. Now, if you will excuse me, a new transfer student from Tibet is entering the school today, and I need to introduce her to the campus. Underscore 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 calculating. The stranger now found himself entering a large open facility, similar to the area used for the carnival competition, complete with an entire false city, clearly meant for combat purposes. He quietly watched high in the rafters of the building, watching as one of the large energy signatures he caught sight of entered the area. His eye managed to lock onto the individual and get a good grasp of her appearance. Her height was comparable to Satellizer, though she was adorned in the standard purple uniform of the Stents. Strangely, she had red hair. Like Ganesa, though her hair was let down completely and his skin was slightly paler. Perhaps the most noteworthy difference was the cold, almost bitter expression on her face. It was clear just from observing her power level was higher than Miyabi's by a sufficient margin and would have been able to defeat her or Satellizer should they come to blows. Listening in, her heard the limiter who had accompanied her speak and address her by her name. New target identified. Ingrid Berstein, a member of the third-year group of this school. Based on prior experience with target Miyabi, she will provide sufficient data on the higher-level Pandora that attend this academy. His eyes proceeded to record the training session that took place, involving a dummy Nova, specifically one of the R class. An outdated class when compared to the S-type Nova, but still dangerous. Yet Ingrid's expression remained unflinching, as her weapons, a pair of bladed tonfas, were deployed. She then proceeded to decimate the dummy R, first utilizing an acceleration to close the distance between herself and the Nova. To the amazement of the watcher, he then watched as she announced another technique. Tempest turn. Her body then seemingly split into 4 identical clones, all glowing with blue kinetic energy, that proceeded to slash away at the nova, before revealing its core, and then finishing it off with another high-speed strike. New data found. In addition to their acceleration technique, the Pandora also have a skill known as Tempest Turn. This ability seems to involve using high-speed movement to create solid after images that can drastically increase attacking power. His mind quickly mulled over the data, going over the various clones and movement to determine the best effective countermeasure. He continued to focus in on Ingrid, who seemed all but disappointed in the exercise, as if finding it to be not worth her time. Obviously, there was more to her than what was being displayed, and it was unlikely she'd show it off without cause. An idea quickly formed in his mind. Seems like she wants a real challenge. I bet we could get a lot more info if we fought her directly. Interjection. While combat data would prove invaluable, the purpose of this mission is to retain stealth and remain discreet. Despite this notion, the Watcher's red arm started to pulse again, reflective of his own longing for another engagement. They already know we're here anyway, might as well get as much info as possible. Besides, we won't attack her in broad daylight. We can wait until nightfall and go after her when she's alone. He remained silent as this proposition processed through his brain and back to the Nova themselves, who surprisingly did not immediately send another electric jolt through his brain. Another moment passed before the Watcher received his response, identified by his golden eye glowing in response. New course of action deemed within mission parameters. Will engage subject known as Ingrid when night has fallen and subject is alone to properly gauge her abilities and learn more about these more advanced techniques that third years seem to have. His eye then turned to his bandaged arm, which shimmered brighter with crimson light, as the handle of his massive sword briefly formed in his hand, before disappearing as he closed it. Countermeasure 1 should be sufficient for this objection. However, if necessary, will eliminate target with extreme prejudice. Underscore 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 night quickly proceeded to fall over the campus, as Ingrid was making her usual patrol of the courtyard, acting under the guise of her unofficial title, the Guardian of Order. Naturally, she looked for any who dared to break the rules and would offer swift punishment, and today was no different. Not in the least. The school seems oddly quiet despite all that's happened in the last few days. After what those second years pulled the other day, I'm amazed our school hasn't already fallen apart. Her expression hardened as she thought about how blatantly Satelizer and Ganesa had broken several key rules, to use Pandora mode of all things over a petty grudge. Utterly disgraceful, and to think they carry the title of strongest of their year. For a brief moment her own weapon actually started to form in her hand as she contemplated paying the girls a visit. Perhaps a little lesson in DSPLN is in order. Best to stamp it out now, before it spreads to the others. As she walked, a familiar pair of mismatched eyes watched her under the cloak of darkness, yet her mind remained elsewhere as she thought to more recent events. On the other hand, Miyabi's been proving to be more trouble than she's worth. Between her reputation with limiters and her blatant abuse of power, perhaps she'd be more worth my time. She quietly stopped in place, pondering her next move. Then again, maybe you would. In an instant, one of her weapons formed in her left hand as she launched it like a missile into the tree line roughly 50 feet away, annihilating the trees and ground beneath it. However, thanks to her stigmata, Ingrid could easily see through the trees and saw that she didn't actually hit anything other than foliage, yet wasn't deterred. Quickly reforming her weapons in her hands. I don't know who you are, but skulking around the school grounds after hours is blatant violation of code. Her face shifted into a smirk as she tried to zero in on the intruder, able to feel his gaze still on her despite the darkness. But you don't care about that, do you? I can tell you're not a student or a teacher. which means you're an unwelcome intruder and a threat to the safety of this school. Thus, as a Pandora, I'm honor-bound to bring you to justice. So save yourself some pain and come out. Maybe I'll even go easy on you." Her response at first was only silence, yet a presence seemingly formed out of the shadows behind her. "Pity. I was almost looking forward to hunting you down like the coward you seem to be, but I suppose you have a little backbone after all." She finally got a good look at the stranger, and his appearance made his status as an intruder all the more obvious. Between the hood obscuring his face, his black, ripped clothing, and his oddly bandaged right arm, he looked more like a phantom gang member than a student. My, don't you just look suspicious? I don't know what exactly you're doing here, and frankly, it doesn't matter. Anyone who threatens the order of this academy will be eliminated, no matter the reason. She quickly shifted into a combat stance, aiming one of her tonfa at the stranger. "I hope you're ready." The stranger, however, remained completely stationary, seemingly unaffected by her little speech or the weapons pointed at him. Even his face remained completely stone-like, as Ingrid could see his one blue eye through the hood staring directly at her. The empty look it held actually made her feel a tad uneasy. Target located and identified. Ingrid Berstein, classification, 3rd year Pandora. Threat level assessment, inconclusive. The stranger's robotic voice actually made the redhead flinch, not expecting such a tone. Taunt issued. You have anger issues. Awaiting response. Eh? However, she was even less prepared for what happened next as he disappeared in a flash of red kinetic energy, cracking the ground beneath him before reappearing in the air in front of her, raising his bandaged arm. An excel? But how? Beginning combat assessment. Ingrid barely had a chance to leap back before her opponent smashed his fist into the ground, creating a mini tremor that ripped open the earth, leaving behind a crater big enough to use as a pool. Ingrid found herself breathing erratically, trying to recover from the shock of what she just witnessed, tightening her grip on her weapon as a bead of sweat formed on her brow. What incredible strength! No normal human could cause that kind of devastation, only a Pandora could. And that movement, it was obviously an excel, but that shouldn't be possible. Quietly shifting back into her stance, while opening her senses up to ensure another sneak attack would happen. Is he some type of experiment to create male Pandora or something else? No, it doesn't matter. Regardless of what he may be, he's a threat to this school. Readying her weapons, Ingrid began to flare up with kinetic energy. "I hope you enjoyed that little sneak attack, because it's the last time you'll get the drop on me. Accelerate." With a powerful burst, she launched at her opponent, slashing her right tonfa forward to slash at him. However, to her surprise, in another flash of red he disappeared, only to reappear right behind her. "Behind me, need to move." She quickly used another excel to avoid the attack, only to find him once again right in front of her. How can he keep up with me so easily? Again she tried to accelerate to avoid, but he was again right after her. This time he appeared in front of her with his fist already launching forward. No time to dodge, need to block now. Quickly crossing the blades of her weapons, they managed to intercept the strike. But the amount of force behind it still sent the 3rd year crashing into the ground. The Watcher meanwhile simply landed on his feet, scanning over the destruction. Current observation. While Ingrid's skills and energy are stronger than those of Miyabi, the difference in ability is hardly worthy of noting. Threat assessment is minimal at this point. He would have continued had Ingrid not followed up by blasting away all the dust she'd kicked up with a surge of blue energy, locking onto him with a cold expression. "I'll give you credit, keeping up with a 3rd year's excel is impressive, but don't get CCKY, it's basic skill we Pandora are taught." The energy around her quickly began to condense into a blue outline, as the ground around her feet began to crack. "Now that I know just how dangerous you are, I don't have to hold back any longer. Get ready." Tempest turn. Just like before where once there was one, now 4 exact copies of Ingrid appeared, all covered with blue energy, moving at dramatically increased speeds than before. They quickly broke off from their formation and began to encircle their target from all sides. The Watcher now found himself struggling as his eye tried to keep up with the erratic movement of the 4 clones. Despite having seen the technique used prior that had at best been a mere moment, a microsecond, hardly enough time to learn anything useful. As such, he couldn't quite protect himself from the onslaught of strikes to his body from the multiple tonfa that were being wielded against him. Each blow hit with the same force as a high-speed sledgehammer, and they were all occurring simultaneously. One final strike to the jaw was enough to send him hurtling backwards into a nearby fountain, obliterating the stone and uprooting the pipes. His body, however, didn't slow as it actually dug into the ground and skidded back, leaving a trail of dirt and stone behind him. Ingrid, meanwhile, having cancelled her technique, looked upon the devastation, though didn't show any kind of pride at finally managing to land a few blows on her opponent. The fact I needed to resort to using Tempest Turn on someone who's not even a Pandora. I don't know what that guy is, but I can't allow this fight to go on another minute. One more good blow should do it. Her body began to glow again as she readied another Tempest Turn, only to stop as a familiar crimson light erupted from the hole the stranger had created. Appropriate threat level reached. Deploying countermeasure 1. Execute. Ching! The red-haired teen actually had to stop herself from dropping her jaw and dripping over her own feet when she saw the stranger again. This time he was wielding a massive black double-bladed Zanbato-style sword. The weapon looked to almost be at least 8 or 9 feet in length and was probably around almost a foot thick and weighed close to a ton. Yet he was holding it up in one hand like it was a simple metal pipe. Ingrid, however, hardened her gaze and resumed her energy output. He's more dangerous than I perceived. I need to take him down now. She took another look at the blade he was now pointing in her direction, but shook off any fear she might have had. Even with a weapon that size, my Tempest Turn's already shown it's too fast for him to follow. Having a massive sword won't make any difference. Without missing a beat, she executed her Tempest Turn again, eager to finish her opponent off then and there. The 4 clones quickly closed in around their target, whose eyes again made their best attempt to follow the doppelgangers. The encircling group quickly struck forth with lightning precision, striking his legs, chest, back and face from every direction. However, unlike before, the stranger quickly retaliated by swinging his sword outwards in a wide horizontal arc, with the blade's insane width and length adding to its lethality. Naturally, Ingrid had expected this attack, and the clones responded in kind, with one leaping back while the other leapt up, and another ducked under the blade. However, the last was quickly cleaved in two. Yet the 3 remaining weren't deterred and quickly let loose a barrage of strikes to his upper body, with Ingrid herself actually launching herself forward and using the increased speed to rotate her body, spinning the blades of her weapons in a saw-like motion that cleaved a wide arc across the watcher's chest. For the briefest moment, Ingrid could swear she saw the one visible eye of her opponent widen as a line of BLD appeared across his chest before he collided with the ground again, though his hand was still clutching his massive blade. Quickly reforming not too far away, Ingrid now found herself breathing slightly heavier, having narrowly avoided being cut in half. Even though I was using Tempest Turn, he still managed to react quickly enough to take out one of my clones. If I'd been any slower, that would have been me. Her mind quickly envisioned her actual body being on the receiving end of the blade. Hopefully that strike will keep him down. I can't afford to overexert myself by overusing Tempest Turn. However, any further thoughts she had were promptly silenced by the watcher quickly rising to his feet, despite the BLD that was clearly visible through the gash along his chest. To Ingrid's surprise, he actually reached down, touching the cut before bringing the BLD up to his face. Unit has sustained damage, injury serious but not critical. Healing protocol initiated. In mere seconds, the wound started to glow bright red before quickly sealing itself up, leaving only what appeared to be tan human skin under the black clothing. Ingrid, of course, didn't even notice this, too busy looking horrified at the fact his last attack had pretty much accomplished nothing. So he can regenerate on top of his other abilities. Just what the hell is this thing? The watcher meanwhile only looked at Ingrid, with his yellow eye now going over all the data that he'd acquired from the fight thus far. Despite being thrown around and slashed, it had proven quite valuable. New data has proven valuable, will now begin execution and counteroffensive. His stance shifted with his blade now raised in preparation to attack. Ingrid meanwhile had actually taken a step back, finding herself unnerved by how he so easily shrugged off her attack. This fight's gone on too long. I'm ending this now. I'll make my Tempest Turn twice as fast this time. Her aura ignited again, much stronger than before, as she readied her next attack. I hope you're ready, because this'll be the last attack you ever see Tempest Turn. Again the 4 clones appeared, and like before they rocked towards their target, eager to finish him off for good. Commencing attack protocol. Without so much a blinking, the watcher disappeared and reappeared in a single red flash, right in the center of Ingrid's tempest turn. His movements were as fast as lightning, his massive sword cutting clean through two of Ingrid's clones, while his right leg obliterated the third in a sharp lash of its own. Ingrid didn't even realize it before it was too late, as the stranger's bandage-clad hand wrapped itself around her neck in a vice of pure iron, shattering the tempest turn completely. Protocol complete, her captor announced, perversely pleased with himself. Technique nullified. Impossible. He appeared right at the point when the clones separated, enabling him to attack them all simultaneously with no time to counter. He completely nullified my technique. Threat level exceeded. How did you catch? His grip increased like a clamp, actually causing the bones in her neck to crack, her words dying off in a strangled gurgle. Her breathing became haggard, and in a fit of desperation she found herself forced to drop her weapons, leaving them to dissipate harmlessly against on the ground. Ingrid barely noticed. Her hands were far too busy trying to pry those crushing fingers off her neck. Sufficient data acquired. Subject Ingrid now a liability. Said girl's eyes quickly filled with fear as the stranger's free hand arced back, fingers crooked into a claw. Terminating. That was all he got out before something rammed into him from behind, forcibly dislodging his grip on the injured Pandora. The attack itself did little more than drive him forward half a step, but it was still enough for his target to scramble away from him, clutching at her fractured windpipe. What the hell's going on here, huh? Naruto frowned, turning. Additional threats. Once more he found himself face to face with additional Pandora, a group of third years he didn't recognize. Two girls with strange, silver hair. One with dusky skin and another redhead. The latter of which appeared to be the one who'd struck him in the first place, if her exposed volt weapon was any indication. Arnett, Creo, Atia, Ingrid cried. Where the hell have you been? Looking for you, dumbass. So, this is the intruder. The smallest of the group mused. He doesn't look like much. His frown deepened. Will exterminate with extreme prejudice. Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.